Most gun owners think a recall begins when the government orders one. That is not how handgun recalls work. In this countdown, 10 striker-fired pistols expose a hidden system of safety warnings, voluntary upgrades, and courtroom battles. And number 1 raises the question the entire industry fears. What happens if mandatory recalls finally become possible? Number 10, the Ruger SR9. Ruger built the SR9 to go straight at Glock. A slim polymer frame, a striker-fired action, and a price that undercut most of the market. It arrived in late 2007, and gun writers liked it. Then, in April of 2008, Ruger published a notice with a headline that read, in capital letters, "Do not use your Ruger SR9 pistol." The company had determined that pistols built between October 2007 and April 2008 could fire if dropped, provided the manual safety was in the fire position. With the safety engaged, they would not. Ruger did not soften it. The word recall appeared in the title of the notice. Every pistol carrying the serial prefix 330 was called back to the Prescott, Arizona factory for a completely redesigned trigger group. That redesign is the interesting part. Ruger added a pivoting blade inside the trigger face, the same basic concept Glock had been using for decades. Engineers also reworked the magazine release, the magazine disconnect, and the striker blocker itself. Roughly 11,000 pistols went back. Owners got a free magazine for the inconvenience. It was fast, it was clearly worded, and it cost the company money. Which is exactly why it stands out against everything that follows. Number 9. The Glock Gen 4. By 2011, Glock had spent a generation defining what a striker-fired pistol was supposed to be. The Gen 4 was supposed to refine it. A new dual recoil spring assembly, interchangeable backstraps, a reversible magazine catch. Instead, shooters started reporting erratic ejection, brass to the face, and stoppages with lighter ammunition, particularly on the 9mm Glock 17 and Glock 19. On September 6, 2011, Glock began exchanging the recoil spring assembly on every Gen 4 pistol sold before July 22nd of that year. The Glock 26 and Glock 27 were excluded. The company sent a chart to armorers showing the different part variations and how to identify them. Notice the language. Glock called it a voluntary exchange, framed around standardizing the part and meeting internal performance goals. The word recall appeared almost nowhere in official materials. The part was owner installable during a normal field strip, so the pistol never had to leave the customer's hands. That distinction matters more than it sounds. This was a reliability issue rather than a discharge hazard, and Glock handled it with a shipping envelope and a diagram. But it established a vocabulary the entire industry would lean on for the next 15 years. Voluntary exchange, upgrade program, safety bulletin, anything except the one word that carries legal weight. Number 8. The Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. 2 years after the Gen 4 exchange, the language stayed the same, but the stakes did not. On August 22, 2013, Smith & Wesson published what it called an important consumer safety alert covering every M&P Shield built before August 19th of that year. The mechanism was subtle. The company had identified a condition where the trigger bar pin could damage the lower trigger over time. That damage could compromise the drop safety function, potentially allowing the pistol to discharge if it was dropped. Smith & Wesson told owners to stop using their pistols immediately until they were inspected. Then it did something unusual. Rather than calling every shield back to Springfield, Massachusetts, the company published a home inspection procedure and a video. Owners were told to press the trigger, watch a small plastic tab on the trigger face disappear into the upper section, then release and confirm the tab returned on its own. If the tab came back every time, the pistol was fine. If it did not, the gun had to be shipped in. It was efficient, and for most owners it worked. But it also moved the first line of safety inspection from a factory bench to a kitchen table. The Shield was already one of the best-selling concealed carry pistols in the country, and Smith & Wesson was asking hundreds of thousands of people to become their own quality control department. Number 7. The Springfield XDS. 6 days after the Shield alert, Springfield Armory announced its own action, and this one used the actual word. On August 28, 2013, Springfield launched a voluntary safety recall of the 3.3-inch XDS in 9mm and 45 ACP. The stated conditions were specific and serious. Under rare circumstances, the pistol could discharge during loading when the slide was released, or it could double fire, sending 2 rounds downrange from a single trigger pull. Springfield published the affected serial ranges, covered all shipping in both directions, and instructed owners to stop using the pistol and carefully unload it. The company emphasized that no injuries had been reported. By multiple accounts, this was the first recall in Springfield Armory's modern history. The follow-through was the rough part. Owners reported waiting weeks, and in some cases more than 2 months, to get their pistols back. A small logistics operation was absorbing a nationwide return in the middle of a firearm sales boom, which is an understandable outcome rather than a scandal. But it illustrates something worth sitting with. Every one of these programs depends entirely on a manufacturer's own capacity and willingness to run it. Nobody sets a deadline. Nobody audits the completion rate. Nobody follows up on the pistols that never came back. And with the XDS selling as fast as Springfield could build them, a meaningful number never did. Number 6. The Ruger American Pistol. Not every safety problem involves an unintended discharge, and this one is a useful correction to that assumption. In October of 2018, Ruger issued a safety bulletin for Ruger American pistols chambered in 9mm. The company had discovered that some examples exhibited premature wear on the locking surfaces between the slide and the barrel. Left alone, that wear could eventually allow a crack to develop in the slide near the ejection port. A cracking slide on a duty-sized pistol is a genuine hazard. Slides are under enormous stress every time the gun cycles, and a failure there sends metal in the direction of the shooter's face. Ruger offered a free retrofit and asked owners to check their serial numbers. The company called it a safety bulletin rather than a recall. That is a meaningful choice. Ruger's own public archive lists both categories side by side, and the SR9 from 10 years earlier sits there under the word recall while this one sits under bulletin. Same company, same website, different vocabulary, and the only real difference is how the internal legal assessment came out. Number 5. The Canik TP9SF. On September 1, 2017, Century Arms published something called the Canik Product Safety Warning and Severe Duty Upgrade Notice. It applied to 5 9mm models, the TP9SA, the TP9SF, the TP9SFX, and the TP9SF Elite S. The stated finding was that repeated abusive dropping could damage the pistol's safety features and result in an unintentional discharge. Century was careful to say the pistols met and exceeded current industry and military abusive handling standards, and that there were no safety concerns under ordinary use. The remedy was an upgraded trigger safety spring and an upgraded firing pin block spring at no cost. Now look at which Caniks were not on that list. The TP9V1, the TP9V2, and the TP9DA. Those are the double-action, single-action models with a decocker, the ones derived from the Walther P99 lineage. They were excluded entirely. That exclusion is the whole story of this video in one line. The affected pistols were the ones carrying a partially or fully pre-tensioned striker at rest. The unaffected pistols were the ones you could decock. When the energy is already stored in the gun, the internal safety parts are the only thing standing between that stored energy and a primer. Damage those parts, or design them with too little margin, and the physics stop caring about your intentions. Number 4. The Honor Defense Honor Guard. In December of 2017, an independent firearms writer named Patrick Roberts Firearms published a video showing an honor guard pistol releasing its striker when the rear of the slide was struck with a rubber mallet. Another outlet replicated the result the following day using primed cases and reported that a remarkably light impact was enough to set it off. Honor Defense, a small Georgia company founded by a former Beretta USA executive, initially pushed back hard. The company stated it had complied with industry testing standards, that testing had been done both internally and by an outside lab, and that any firearm can discharge if handled abusively. It published its own video of a pistol being struck with a steel hammer until the frame broke without firing. Within weeks, the position changed. Honor Defense offered a free voluntary upgrade to any Honor Guard owner who wanted one, replacing components in the slide. Then, in 2019, a retired New York City police officer named Ernest Huang filed suit in Florida, alleging that his holstered Honor Guard fired when he dropped it, shattering the bone in his left leg near his family. His attorneys argued the pistol should have been recalled. The company is no longer operating. What changed here was not engineering. It was who found the problem. A YouTube channel with a mallet did what no federal laboratory was empowered to do. Number 3. The Taurus P320 Millennium Pro. This is the closest thing the American firearms industry has to a mandatory recall, and it did not come from a regulator. It came from an Iowa sheriff's deputy named Chris Carter. Carter's class action alleged that a group of Taurus pistols contained 2 separate defects: a drop-fire condition that could cause them to discharge when dropped from ordinary height, and what his filing called a false safety, meaning the pistol could fire even with the manual safety lever in the on position. In May of 2015, Taurus agreed to a settlement valued at up to $39 million. 9 models were covered, including the PT-132, PT-138, PT-140, PT-15, and PT-745 Millennium pistols. The company admitted no wrongdoing. It agreed to a court-supervised voluntary recall covering roughly 1 million firearms, with owners able to return their pistol for a payment or an exchange. The claims window ran to February 6, 2018. That is the entire enforcement architecture. A deputy sheriff, a plaintiff's firm, a federal judge in Florida, and a deadline printed on a website. There was no agency notice, no mandated completion rate, and no penalty for owners who never heard about it. Guns purchased secondhand, inherited, or bought at a table years earlier simply stayed in circulation. Court filings and subsequent reporting connected the alleged defect to serious injuries and deaths, including incidents in which the pistol was reported to have discharged while holstered or during loading. Taurus has consistently denied that its pistols were defective, and the settlement resolved the matter without any legal finding on that question. What is not in dispute is the scale. 1 million pistols, 1 mailing list, and a 2.5-year window. Number 2. The Sig Sauer M18. On July 20, 2025, a 21-year-old Security Forces airman named Braden Loven died at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming in an incident involving an M18 pistol. The M18 is the compact military variant of the Sig P320, standard issue across the services and carried by personnel guarding the American nuclear arsenal. The next day, General Thomas Bussiere, commander of Air Force Global Strike Command, ordered every unit under his command to pause all operational and training use of the M18. Combat arms airmen were directed to conduct 100% inspections at every base in the command. This is where accuracy matters more than drama. The Air Force later announced that an individual had been arrested on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and making a false official statement in connection with the death. The pause was not a finding against the pistol. Global Strike Command completed inspections of nearly 8,000 M18 handguns, deemed them safe and reliable, and returned them to service in August of that year. But the pause happened at all because of the context surrounding it. Weeks earlier, An FBI report examining a 2024 incident involving a Michigan State trooper's holstered M18 had concluded it may be possible for the pistol to discharge without a trigger pull under a specific set of circumstances. Sig Sauer publicly rejected that finding, arguing the FBI had manipulated the sear improperly during testing. Within days, reporting emerged that federal agencies were reassessing the platform, and Sig issued statements disputing several of those accounts. Both sides were making public arguments about the same pistol in the same week, and neither was backing down. Number 1. The Sig Sauer P320. In August of 2017, after videos circulated showing a P320 discharging when dropped at a negative 30-degree angle, Sig Sauer announced what it named the Voluntary Upgrade Program. The company stated that dropping the pistol beyond United States standards for safety could cause an unintentional discharge, and offered owners a lighter trigger, striker, and sear assembly derived from the M17 military variant. The M17 itself was not affected. Sig has never used the word recall. What followed has no clean parallel in modern firearms history. More than 100 federal lawsuits. 2 significant plaintiffs' verdicts in Georgia in 2024 and in Philadelphia later that year. Departments in Alabama, Connecticut, Florida, Texas, and Wisconsin removing the pistol. The Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission permanently banning it from its training facilities after a 4-month investigation into a recruit's pistol discharging during a draw. Sig's response has been unusually direct for this industry. The company maintains the P320 cannot fire without a trigger pull, points to compliance with SAMI and National Institute of Justice standards, and to United States Army testing, and notes that courts have excluded plaintiffs' experts on reliability grounds and dismissed roughly 20 cases. In April of 2026, a Colorado federal court dismissed 1 case with prejudice. In July of 2026, the 8th Circuit ordered a certified Missouri class action dismissed in its entirety, holding that a plaintiff must experience an actual defect rather than a theoretical one. A Philadelphia judge vacated a $10 million punitive award. Switzerland selected the P320 as its new service pistol. Michigan State Police adopted it. And in October of 2025, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin sued Sig Sauer under a state firearms industry law, seeking something no state had ever formally demanded of a modern handgun: a mandatory recall. So can every striker-fired pistol in America actually be recalled? Here is the part almost nobody outside the industry knows. When Congress created the Consumer Product Safety Commission in 1972, firearms were carved out. The amendment came from Michigan Representative John Dingell, who sat on the board of the National Rifle Association, and a further amendment in the mid-70s made the exclusion explicit. The practical result has not changed in 50 years. The federal government can order a recall of a candle, a crib, a bicycle helmet, or a toy gun. It cannot order the recall of a real one. There is no agency that collects firearm defect complaints. No agency that sets mandatory design standards. No agency with authority to compel a single pistol off a shelf. The industry writes its own testing protocol through an organization called the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute, founded in 1926 at the request of the federal government itself. Its abusive mishandling standard is worth understanding, because it is the only technical bar most of these pistols ever had to clear. The firearm is loaded with dummy cartridges and a single primed empty case in the chamber. It is dropped from 4 feet onto a 1-inch rubber mat laid over a concrete floor from a minimum of 6 different orientations. After each drop, the primer is inspected. Parts can break, the frame can crack. As long as that primer does not ignite, the pistol passes 6 orientations. That is the entire evaluated envelope, and the P320 condition Sig acknowledged in 2017 appeared at a negative 30-degree angle. An orientation independent reviewers pointed out was not among the standard 6. Compliance with the whole document is voluntary anyway, which is why the pressure has moved somewhere else. States built handgun rosters. California, Massachusetts, New York, Maryland, and the District of Columbia all require drop testing and firing testing before a pistol can be sold at retail, which makes market access the enforcement mechanism instead of a recall order. New Jersey, California, Delaware, and New York passed laws letting attorneys general sue manufacturers directly,